When my daughter-in-law handed me that letter and told me to read it alone, I smiled at her. I don't know why I smiled. Maybe I was trying to show her that I was still strong. Maybe I didn't want her to see the fear in my eyes. Or maybe, somewhere deep inside me, I already knew what that letter was going to say. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the same bed I had slept in for 31 years, the same room where I had nursed my sick husband back to health, the same four walls that had held my laughter, my prayers, and my tears for most of my life. I held that letter for a long time before I opened it. The room was very quiet. Outside, I could hear the sound of children playing in the street. I could smell something cooking in the kitchen downstairs. I think it was rice. My son always loved rice with a little extra salt. I taught him that. I taught him so many things. I unfolded the letter slowly, and when I read the first line, something inside me went very still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from peace. No, this was the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm. The kind where the birds stop singing, where the wind holds its breath, where everything just stops. I read it twice, then a third time, as if reading it again would change the words, as if the letters would rearrange themselves into something kinder. They did not. I folded the letter back. I placed it on my lap. I looked out the window at the last orange light of the evening sky, and I thought to myself, so this is how it ends. Not with shouting, not with a big fight, not with broken dishes or slammed doors. Just a letter, quiet and polite and absolutely devastating. I want to tell you this story from the beginning because I think it is important that you understand this did not happen overnight. These things never do. They grow slowly, like weeds in a garden you thought was well tended. You pull one here, you ignore one there, and one day you wake up and the garden is gone. This is my story, and I am going to tell it to you the way it truly happened.
My name is Margaret. Most people call me Mama Margaret, or just Mama. I am 67 years old. I have lived a full life. Not always an easy life, but a full one. I grew up in a small town. My parents were farmers. We did not have much, but we had each other, and that was always enough. I married my husband, Joseph, when I was 24 years old. He was a quiet man with a kind face and the most patient heart I have ever known. We built our life together brick by brick, slowly, carefully, the way people used to do things. We had 2 children. Our daughter, Patricia, was our firstborn. She was sharp and clever and always moving. She left home at 22 for a city far away, married a good man, and built her own life. We were proud of her. We missed her, but we were proud. Our son, Daniel, was different. Daniel was our gentle one. He was the kind of boy who would cry at the end of a sad film and then pretend he had something in his eye. He loved music. He loved cooking, which he learned from me. He loved long Sunday mornings when the whole family sat together and there was no rush to be anywhere. Daniel was my heart. When Daniel was 30 years old, he met a woman named Claire. Claire was beautiful. I mean that sincerely. She was truly a beautiful woman. Tall, with smooth skin and intelligent eyes that noticed everything. She came from a different kind of family than ours. Her parents were educated people, professional people. They lived in a big house in a nice part of the city. They dressed well and spoke carefully, and always seemed to know exactly the right thing to say. When Daniel brought her home for the first time, I cooked for 2 full days. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted her to feel welcomed. I set the table with the good plates, the ones I only used for special occasions. I put flowers in a vase in the sitting room. I wanted her to see that even though our home was simple, it was filled with love. She was polite that first visit. She said all the right things. She complimented the food. She laughed at the right moments. She held my hand when she said goodbye and told me she was glad to finally meet me. I thought, this is a good woman. My son has chosen well. Joseph liked her too. He said to me that night after they left, "She seems steady, Mama. I think she will be good for him." And so the wedding came. It was a simple ceremony, not extravagant. Daniel was never one for show, but it was warm and full of people who loved them. I cried, of course. I think every mother cries at her son's wedding, not from sadness, from that particular mixture of joy and letting go that only a mother knows. After the wedding, they moved into a house about 20 minutes from ours. The early years were good. We would have Sunday dinners together. Daniel would call me most mornings on his way to work, just to check in, just to talk. Claire and I would sometimes go to the market together on Saturday mornings. She was teaching herself to cook more traditional foods, and she would ask me questions, and I would show her things I had learned from my own mother. I thought we were building something real, something lasting. Joseph passed away 4 years into their marriage. A heart attack, very sudden, no warning. That loss changed everything for me. When you lose the person you have shared your whole life with, you lose a piece of yourself that you never get back. You walk through the same rooms, you eat at the same table, you sleep in the same bed, but everything feels different. Everything feels quieter and lonelier than you ever imagined possible. Daniel was wonderful during that time. He came every day for the first month. He sat with me. He held my hand. He cried with me, which meant more to me than I can say. Claire came too in those early weeks. She brought food. She helped me sort through some of Joseph's things. She was kind. But slowly, the way these things happen slowly, the visits became less frequent. The phone calls got shorter. Life moved on for them, as it should, as it must. I understood. But understanding something does not make it hurt less.
About 8 months after Joseph died, Daniel and Claire asked me something. They were sitting with me in my living room. Claire had made tea. She knew how I liked it, which I always appreciated. Daniel was holding his cup with both hands the way he always did as a boy. He said, "Mama, we've been thinking. We don't like you being here alone. We have a spare room, a good room. We want you to come and live with us." I looked at both of them. Claire was nodding. She was smiling. She said, "It would be good, Mama, for all of us." I did not say yes immediately. I was not the kind of woman who rushed into things. I thought about it for several weeks. I spoke to Patricia on the phone. She was supportive. She said it sounded like a good idea, though she also gently reminded me to make sure it was truly what I wanted. In the end, I said yes. I moved into their home in the spring. At first, it felt right. Their house was comfortable, my room was lovely, it had a window that looked out onto the garden, and in the mornings I would sit there with my tea and watch the birds come to the little feeder Daniel had put up just for me. I tried very hard to be a good guest, a good mother-in-law. I knew how delicate this balance was. I had heard enough stories from other women to know that this kind of arrangement required care and respect from both sides. I did not interfere in their decisions. When Claire cooked dinner, I complimented it, and I meant it because she was a good cook. I kept my room tidy. I did not walk into rooms without knocking. I did not give opinions unless I was asked. I helped where I could. I would prepare breakfast sometimes because I woke early and they slept later. I would do some light cleaning. I would tend to the garden, which I loved. For a while, it worked. But then, small things began to happen. It started with the kitchen. Claire had a particular way she liked things organized. The cups on the left side, the spices in a specific order, the cutting board always on the right counter. I learned these things slowly, by noticing. But sometimes, not often, just sometimes, I would put something in the wrong place without thinking, just from old habit. She never said anything directly, but I would come back to the kitchen later and find everything silently rearranged. I did not take offense. I simply learned to be more careful. Then there was the matter of the grandchildren. Daniel and Claire had 2 children, Thomas, who was 7, and little Anna, who was 4. I loved those children with every part of me. Being near them was one of the greatest joys of my later years. I would read to Anna every afternoon. She would climb into my lap with her favorite book, a story about a small mouse who wanted to see the ocean, and I would read it to her so many times that we both knew every word by heart. Thomas was more reserved, like his father at that age, but slowly he began to warm to me. He would show me his drawings. He would ask me questions about when his father was small, and I would tell him stories that made his eyes go wide. But I began to notice that Claire would sometimes redirect the children away from me without any clear reason. She would call Anna away mid-story with some small errand. She would tell Thomas that Grandma needed her rest, even when I was perfectly well and happy to be with them. It happened often enough that I started to wonder if I was doing something wrong. I asked Daniel about it once, quietly, privately, when Claire had gone out. He looked uncomfortable. He said, "Mama, you know how she is. She just worries about the children being overwhelmed." I said, "Daniel, the children come to me. I do not go looking for them." He nodded. He said he would speak to Claire, but I never saw that conversation happen, and nothing changed. There were other small things. When Claire's family came to visit, her parents, her sister, there was a different energy in the house. The table would be set more formally, the conversation would flow easily and freely, there was laughter and warmth. When my side of the family visited, my sister, my old friends, the visits felt shorter. There was a certain politeness that felt more like distance than welcome. Claire would excuse herself to do things in the kitchen. The visits would end early for some reason or another. I noticed. I did not say anything, but I noticed. The hardest thing was the feeling of becoming invisible in a house where I lived. I do not mean that anyone was cruel. There were no shouting matches. There were no terrible scenes. It was subtler than that. It was the way a conversation would shift when I entered a room, the way decisions were made without including me, not just small decisions, but decisions about the house, about the children's schooling, about family plans, and I would find out about them afterward, casually, almost as an afterthought. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was an old woman who had grown too accustomed to being at the center of a family, and now I needed to step back and accept a smaller role. I told myself this was normal. This was the natural order of things. But there was a particular evening, about 14 months after I had moved in, when I understood that what I had been feeling was real. I had come downstairs for a glass of water. It was late. I thought everyone was asleep. But as I passed the kitchen doorway, I heard Daniel and Claire talking. I stopped. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but I heard my name. I heard Claire say, "Daniel, I need you to really hear me. I cannot keep living like this." And I heard my son, my gentle, kind, rice-loving son, say nothing at all. Just silence. I went back upstairs. I did not get my glass of water. The following weeks were difficult. I knew something was coming. When you are a mother, when you have lived as long as I have, you develop a kind of sense for these things. You can feel the air change before the weather does. Daniel became quieter around me. Not unkind, never unkind, but careful, measured, like a man who was holding something heavy and trying not to let it show on his face. Claire was polite, perfectly, precisely polite, the kind of polite that keeps a careful distance. I spent more time in my room. I read. I wrote letters to Patricia, real letters, on paper, the way I always preferred. I called my sister on the phone. I tended my corner of the garden in the mornings. I prayed a great deal. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, Claire came to my room. She knocked. She always knocked, I will give her that. I said, "Come in," and she entered. She was holding a white envelope. She looked composed. Her eyes were steady. She said, "Mama, I want you to read this. Daniel and I wrote it together. We thought it would be better to write it down so that everything was clear." She placed the envelope on my small bedside table. She said, "Take your time. We can talk when you're ready." Then she left. I sat there for a long while before I could bring myself to pick it up. I opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long. It was written in Claire's handwriting, neat, careful, slanting slightly to the right. At the bottom, Daniel had signed his name, just his name, nothing else from him, just his signature, small and quiet at the bottom of the page. I will not read every word to you. Some things are too private for that, but I will tell you the meaning of what it said. It said that they had given this great thought, that they loved me, that they respected me, but that the current arrangement was no longer working for their family, that Claire felt she could not be the woman and mother and wife she needed to be with another adult in the home, that the children were being confused about boundaries, that Daniel and Claire needed their own space to build their own life. It said that they had found a place for me, a small apartment, about 40 minutes away, in a building for older residents, where there were activities and community and support. They had already looked at it. They thought I would be comfortable there. They were prepared to help with the cost. It said they hoped I would understand. It said this decision came from a place of love. It said they wanted me to be happy. I read it 3 times. And here is the strange thing. I did not cry, not right away.
The first thing I felt was not sadness. It was something closer to recognition, as if a part of me had known this was coming for a long time and had been bracing quietly, privately, in the way that only the heart knows how to brace. I thought about Joseph. I wished, more than I had wished for anything in a long time, that he was sitting beside me. I thought about the day Daniel was born, the way the nurse placed him in my arms and he looked up at me with those dark, wondering eyes, the way I had thought, this small person is mine to protect, mine to love. This is the most important thing I will ever do. I thought about the years of cooking and cleaning and worrying and praying, the school plays and the hospital visits and the arguments and the making up, Sunday mornings, the rice with extra salt. And then I thought about Claire. And here is where I surprised myself, because sitting there holding that letter, I found that I was not angry with her. I wanted to be. Part of me searched for the anger, reached for it the way you reach for something familiar. But it was not there, or if it was much smaller than I expected. What I felt instead was something more complicated. I felt the weight of everything that had not been said between us over those 14 months, all the small moments where we had been careful and polite with each other instead of honesty, all the conversations we had never had, all the things she had probably felt and not known how to tell me, all the ways I had probably made her life more difficult without meaning to, without even knowing. I had moved into her home, not mine. I had tried to be careful, yes. I had tried to give space, yes. But had I truly given her what she needed? Had I ever really sat with her, just the two of us, and asked her honestly how she was feeling? Had I made it easy for her to come to me with her worries? Had I ever told her that I understood how hard it must be to share your home, your kitchen, your children, your husband's attention? I sat with these questions for a long time. That night, I did not go down for dinner. I asked Daniel, when he knocked on my door, if I could have some time. He looked pained. He said, "Of course, Mama." He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He left a plate of food outside my door. It was rice, with extra salt. I sat with that plate in my lap, and I allowed myself, finally, to cry. Not for long, not dramatically, just quietly, in the way that older women cry, with the knowledge that tears are a passing thing and mourning comes regardless. I cried for Joseph. I cried for the version of my life I had imagined in my later years, surrounded by family, useful, present. I cried for the small girl Anna who would not have me there to read her the story about the mouse who wanted to see the ocean. I cried for Daniel, who I knew was also hurting, who was caught between the two people he loved most and did not know how to hold both. And yes, I cried a little for myself, because I was a good woman. I had tried to be a good woman, and it had still not been enough. But even as I cried, I held something steady at the center of me, a small, quiet knowledge that had always been there through everything, through Joseph's death, through the loneliness, through every hard thing I had ever faced. The love you give is never wasted, even when it does not come back to you the way you hoped, even when the story does not end the way you imagined. It is never wasted.
I did not leave the next day, or the day after that. It took 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, I did something I had not done in all my time in that house. I asked Claire if we could talk, just the two of us, over tea. She seemed surprised. She agreed. We sat in the kitchen, her kitchen, arranged the way she liked it, cups on the left, spices in their order, and I poured the tea because she always let me do that, and we sat across from each other. I said to her, "I want you to know that I am not angry." She looked at me carefully. I think she was watching for hidden hurt beneath the words. She was an intelligent woman. She knew people did not always mean what they said. I said, "I mean it. I understand. This is your home. I should have understood that better than I did." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "Mama, we do love you. I need you to believe that." I said, "I know you do." And then she did something that I did not expect. She cried. Not loudly, just quietly, the way women cry when they have been holding something in for too long. She put her hand over her mouth, and her eyes filled up, and she looked suddenly much younger than I had ever seen her look. She said, "I never wanted it to be like this. I want you to know that. From the beginning, I wanted it to be different. I didn't know how." I reached across the table and I held her hand. I said, "Neither did I, my dear. Neither did I." We sat like that for a while, not talking, just sitting, and something in the room shifted. Something that had been tight and careful for a long time became, for just that moment, something softer. I think that was the conversation we should have had a year earlier. I think if we had managed to sit like that in those first months, before the distances grew, before the silences hardened, things might have been different. But we did not know how, and maybe that is simply the truth of it. Some distances grow because of cruelty, but many grow simply because two people do not know how to cross the space between them, because pride is easier than vulnerability, because silence feels safer than honesty. Neither of us had been cruel, we had just been afraid. I began to prepare for my move. Patricia flew in to help me. She was steady and practical the way she had always been, making lists, arranging things, keeping the pace of the days ordered. But at night, when the work was done, she would sit with me and hold my hand and let me talk. She said, "Mama, are you sure you're all right?" I thought about it carefully. The honest answer was complicated.
I was not all right in the way that means everything is fine, but I was all right in a deeper sense, in the sense of being intact, of still knowing who I was and what I valued, of still having somewhere underneath the sadness that quiet, persistent warmth that had carried me through every hard thing before this. I said, "I will be. Give me time." She nodded. She said, "You know you can come to me, Mama, whenever you want, for as long as you want." I squeezed her hand. I said, "I know, my love, I know." The morning I left Daniel and Claire's house, I woke very early. I made myself tea in the kitchen, their kitchen, for the last time. I washed my cup and dried it and placed it back, on the left side, the way Claire liked it. I walked through the downstairs rooms quietly, in the early morning stillness. I stood at the doorway of the sitting room, where we had spent so many evenings together. I looked at the family photographs on the wall, Daniel and Claire on their wedding day, Thomas as a baby, little Anna in the garden, one photograph of me and Joseph that Claire had placed there herself, which had meant more to me than she probably knew. I said goodbye to that room, quietly, inside myself. Then I heard small feet on the stairs. Anna came down in her pajamas, her hair loose around her face, rubbing her eyes. She stopped when she saw me, then she ran across the room and threw her arms around my legs. She said in her small, sleepy voice, "Granny, don't go." I bent down and I held her. I held her small, warm body, and I smelled her hair, and I said, very gently, "I'm not going far, my love. I will come and read your book as many times as you want." She looked at me with those serious 4-year-old eyes and said, "Promise?" I said, "I promise." Daniel drove me. We did not talk much in the car. There are some silences that are not empty. They are full, so full that words would only diminish them. As he carried my bags up to my new apartment, I watched him move through the small rooms, checking things, opening windows, making sure everything was right. He was doing what he had always done, trying to take care of people. He was caught, as he had always been caught, between his love for me and his love for Claire, and he was carrying it the way he carried everything, quietly, without complaint, with his whole steady heart. When he finished, he turned to me. His eyes were red at the edges. He said, "Daniel?" I said, "Daniel?" He said, "No, Mama, I need to say it. I'm sorry. For everything." I walked to him. I put my hands on his face the way I used to when he was a boy. I said, "You are a good son. You have always been a good son. Do you hear me?" He nodded. He couldn't speak. I said, "And you are a good husband. Go home to your wife. Take care of your children. Come and visit your old mother. That is all I want from you." He hugged me then, long and tight, the way he used to hug me as a little boy when something frightened him in the night. I held him just as long.
That was 8 months ago now. My apartment is small, but it is mine. I have arranged it the way I like. My cups go wherever I want them to go. My spices have no particular order except the one that makes sense to me. I have a little garden bed outside my window, just a small one, just enough for a few flowers. And in the mornings I have my tea, and I watch the light change, and I listen to the birds. It is quieter than I expected. Some days the quiet is peaceful. Some days it is heavy. That is the honest truth. But I am not alone. Patricia calls me every Sunday without fail. Her voice is the most reliable thing in my week, and I am grateful for it more than she knows. Daniel calls me on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We talk about ordinary things, what the children are doing, what he is cooking, the small details of days passing. It is not the same as before, but it is something real and steady, and I value it. Claire calls me too now. Not often, but she calls. The first time she called, About 3 weeks after I had moved, I was so surprised that I almost did not answer. When I did, there was a brief, careful silence on both ends, and then she said, "Hi, Mama. I just wanted to see how you were settling in." We talked for about 15 minutes, about nothing important, about the apartment, about Anna's new phase of refusing to eat anything orange, about a television program she thought I might enjoy. When we hung up, I sat very still for a while, and then I smiled, a real one. Last month I went to their house for Sunday dinner. I sat at the table I used to sit at every day. Thomas showed me his latest drawing, a detailed picture of a spaceship that he had been working on for 2 weeks. Anna climbed into my lap before dinner and demanded that I read the mouse book, and I did, and we laughed at all the same parts we always laughed at. Claire had cooked. She made something new, a dish she had found in a recipe book, and she asked me honestly what I thought of it, and I told her honestly what I thought, including the small suggestion about the seasoning, and she listened and nodded and did not seem offended. After dinner, when the children had gone to play, Daniel and I sat on the back step the way we used to do when he was a teenager. He had his cup with both hands. I had my shawl around my shoulders. He said, "Are you happy, Mama?" I looked at the garden. I looked at the evening sky. I thought about Joseph, the way I always do in quiet moments. I thought about the long, strange journey of my life, with all its wrong turns and unexpected arrivals. I said, "I am at peace, Daniel, and at my age that is a great deal." He nodded. He understood. What the letter said broke my heart. I will not pretend otherwise. It broke something open in me that I am still slowly, carefully putting back together. That is the truth. But here is the other truth, the one I have carried with me through these quiet months of beginning again. The people who love you will sometimes hurt you, not because they are bad people, not because you did something wrong, but because love is not simple, because family is not simple, because two people can both love each other and still not know how to live together without losing something. And the question is not whether you will be hurt. You will be. All of us will. The question is what you do with that hurt, whether you let it harden into bitterness, which is easy, which is tempting, or whether you soften it, slowly, into understanding. I have chosen understanding, not because it is always easy, not because I have never had a dark night where the old grief rises up and I have to talk myself back to gentleness, but because at 67 years old I know this: the days ahead of me are a gift, not a guarantee, a gift, and I do not want to spend my gift days in bitterness over the ones that are already gone. Joseph would not want that for me, and I do not want it for myself. If there is something I would want you to take from my story, whoever you are, wherever you are listening, it is this: say the hard things before they become letters. Sit across from the people you love and be honest with them, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is awkward, even when you are afraid of what they might say back. The silence feels safer. I know. I chose the silence too for a long time. But silence is a wall, and walls keep out the cold and keep out the warmth in equal measure. Be brave enough to speak. Be humble enough to listen. Be kind enough to forgive. Others, yes, but also yourself. That is all. That is everything. I am going to go and have my tea now. The morning is just beginning. The birds are at the little feeder. The flowers, 3 yellow ones and 2 white, are opening in the early light. My name is Mama Margaret, and I am still here, and that is enough.